Hey guys, welcome back to another tutorial on building a Vue client-side application for both authenticating a user and then updating some basic profile information for them. Today, we're going to focus on opening an image file and cropping it with a third-party library called CropperJS. To make this happen, we're going to create a few components to go inside of our details component that is rendered at the root or home route of our application. If we look at our currently opened application, you can see that we are at the authenticate route, and we get pushed to this route automatically if we try to enter the home route and have not yet logged in or signed up. So let's log in one of our users we've already created in previous tutorials, bob@bob.com, with their password, and when we log in, we should get pushed to the root of this application. So we had a loading page, and right now you can see we're at the root, and we're just displaying the plain old object of this user's details. So let's get started today by creating a Vue component for our form, as well as another component to handle the file input of an image. So this will handle styling the input and getting data from that image. We'll also make sure to expose the image component to the form, which is exposed to the details component. And the details component is what we're seeing here. That's probably a little confusing, but let's get working on it. So I've just shut down our application running in Docker, and I want to change into our client project, this Vue project in the account client folder. And here I want to npm install --save CropperJS, and we're going to do this now and rerun our Docker environment just so that everything is working and we can focus on our UI and template with hot module reload without having to go back and install this or stop Docker later on. Let's now change directories back up to the root, and let's run Docker compose up. Maybe let's just do a build and a force recreate. For some reason, running this Vite application in Vue or Docker, sometimes I have to run Docker compose up a couple of times for it to see our updated dependencies here. And it looks like I have a typo. It should be force recreate. All right, our application is up and running. And actually, I think what the problem might be is that until I import this CropperJS or any of the other dependencies, Vite will not try to add it to the build. So I think maybe after I import CropperJS, then I'll have to rerun Docker compose up. So that could be an issue with Vite that I wasn't seeing with the Vue CLI or like create React app. All right, finally, let's go create that user form I was talking about. So we'll do that in our components folder, and we'll add it at the same level as this login form. Call it userform.view. And we're just going to add a basic template with a name. And let's ignore these warnings from Viter. I need to figure out how to set up a sort of like multi-root application with it, or mono repo or something like that. I forget what it's called, but I didn't. So that's why I got those warnings. Let's save this template. And now let's import this template into the details component. And this is what is rendered. If we go back to the browser, that's what's going to be rendered at the home page. And let's reload because I started the environment again. You can see we have some tokens in our local storage, so the application loads up straight to the root page. And what I was trying to say is that this root page is what is displayed in the details route. So if we go down to details under views, you'll see that right now we are displaying that current user in these curly braces. So that is the data we're fetching. But we want to replace this now with a completely different template. First, we're going to put the user form in the template. So let's just get rid of this, and we'll add a user form, which we just created. We need to import this user form. I'll do that. I'll copy that over. And we actually don't need the use auth, so let's replace that with the user form. Let's get rid of these comments, and then let's make sure we add a component section here, and that will have the user form. And then I think that will be all we need. We don't need this setup function yet, but maybe I'll just leave it in. And there we go. And let's make sure now that we see some title of the user form that just says update user inside of our template. Very good, that's working. Now, I previously said that we would handle all of our business logic in these sort of view pages, meaning the root details component, but I actually think that we may do some of it in the user form. We're not even going to get to that today. I will decide officially by next time how much sort of events or V models I want to create for handling our data. And by data, I mean like posting and interacting with the API. I'm not going to create a global store for this part. I'm just going to deal with state locally in this details component and user form. And the user form will also take an image cropper, which we will create now. And that's sort of the goal for today, so let's do that. And this component is going to be called ImageCropper.view. And this little component will contain a button for opening up your file browser and picking an image. And it will also contain a little area where we can crop the image. Again, let's sort of scaffold this out like we did the user form. I'm just going to copy and paste a basic template with a tag, a header one with some pretty big text that says image cropper, and we give it a name inside of the script. So let's save this. Now let's go back to the user form and let's import the image cropper inside of this. So I'll add the image cropper beneath this update user text. And then down here underneath name, let's add components. And let's make sure the image cropper is included. Oh, and of course, as I always seem to forget, we need to import that image cropper. Very good. I'm going to make this a little smaller. All right, let's save. And let's see if we have some image cropper text. All right, everything should be set up to work on the UI here. So what do we want to do first in this whole image cropper component? Well, that is add a button that will allow us to open the file window. We can do this with an HTML input tag of type file. So let's go to the image cropper here. And I'm going to add actually quite a bit of template, and we'll go over what this is after I add it. All right, and you're going to have some errors because we have not added the logic yet. But basically, we're going to add a button that says select image, and its click handler is going to refer to an image input, which we'll go over shortly. Then we're going to add a second button to clear that image, and this image will then be stored in some sort of local state, which we're going to create. I'll also add an input, but notice that this input is hidden, and this input, when changed, we'll call a file changed method. But most importantly, for now, you'll see that I created something called a ref. This is a template ref. And what this will do is it will give us a sort of field called image input. And you can see when I highlight it, that will allow us to interact with this input in other places in our template or in our script tag. So basically what I can do is do some raw JavaScript, meaning click on this input, normal JavaScript click method. And so this is just a way to not use the browser-defined input styles and kind of create our own styled button for opening an image. And so we already defined these button and button blue styles in our index.css. Then we're just going to have a div that shows just the name of the file here in a span with the selected file.name. And this will make more sense once we add the state. So how do we handle these refs, this image input? How do we get access to this input in other places in both our script and in our button, for example, our template? We do that via a template ref. Let's open up Views documentation. I highly recommend you check out this template ref section of the View Composition API. You may be familiar with using like this $refs in View 2, and you can still use that in View 3. But when we're using the setup methods and the composition API, basically if we create a ref here and give it a name, what we can do is define a ref inside of our setup function. And then once the component is mounted, you can see an on mounted here, you get the reference. So meaning it kind of links up this root you create as a null ref. It will assign it to this div. So basically, the root.value will be the actual div eventually. And so that's how you can get access to these refs in Vue 3. So let's go down to our script. We definitely need to import that ref type. We have the name of the component, and let's now add the setup method that we always need to add when we're working with the composition API. And we're going to add quite a bit here. And I'll save, but let's go back. First of all, is this template ref I just mentioned, image input. Remember that we used to click on this input from the other button. Now, this image input, very importantly, you need to return it in the object that you return from the setup function, or else, you won't be able to link this ref in the input with the ref in the template here. Also, we're going to make some state for the currently selected file. So when the user ends up selecting a file in their browser, meaning when they kind of open this input, so when the file is changed, or when the user selects the file in the browser, this change event handler gets fired, and it's called file changed. And so when that happens, we get the event. We can extract the files from, usually it's from e.target.files. I don't know what the case was for e.datatransfer.files, but for some reason I added that. And if we have files, if there's a length of files, meaning it's greater than 0, we want to just take the first file there and assign it to our selected file. Then, if there is a file cleared, meaning they click this second button to clear the file, then all we're going to do is set the selected file value, meaning this state here, to null. And remember, we're using the selected file to display inside of a span, just to show the name of it. And make sure you return all these inputs that you want in the template in the object that's returned by the setup function. Let's save this and see where our application's at. Excellent. Here's our page that's loaded with those two buttons. You can see some hover effects. And remember, we had that selected file that will show the name next to it. So let's hit select image. I'm going to go to a folder. I have some sample profile images here that I took from a free website with open images. Let's select, actually, this one's good. I like the horizontal image. Well, it's good when we use the cropper. And you can see that it shows the image, but we don't have any sample image displayed. And that's what we're going to get working on next. To do this, we're going to use a web API that most browsers I know of implement called File Reader. We'll create this file reader and then watch our selected file. That's this file in this state here. So we can create a watcher to see when that changes. And so if this selected file changes, we'll then read that in with a file reader, and we'll read it in as a base64 data URL. And then this so-called data URL can be provided to an image tag's source attribute, and it works seamlessly, and you see the image in your browser. So let's first update the template here. We're going to add a couple new pieces of state. One is going to be the actual image source, meaning that data that is read in from the file reader. And the other is we're just going to create a file reader that's set up one time when our component is created. So the setup is kind of added when the component is created. I don't think I need this file reader to be reactive. I created it that way before. Someone comment if this is a bad idea, if I should wrap this, in a ref. The next thing we need to do is, since this file reader is kind of a web API, we have to use its syntax, meaning setting the onload method of it. And so this will get fired when we actually read in the file. And so when we read in the file, the onload gets an event, and to get the actual data from that event, we need to access event.target.result, and then we'll set it to this image source ref. And remember, to access the ref's value, you need to use .value. And then, like I said, we need to watch the selected file, this field, and we'll do that maybe beneath these methods. And this watch effect will say, hey, if selected file changes and it has a value, then read in that selected file's value, because it's a ref again, as data URL. And so when that happens, when this is read in as a data URL, that's when this file reader.onload gets fired, and then we set the image source. And then we'll be able to access this image source in an image tag of our template. Otherwise, we want to set the image source to null because that means we're going from having a file to not having a file. And we need to import this watch effect from view. So let's scroll up and import it and save. Now to be able to see this image, we're going to add an image tag at the top of our template. So let's go above all of these. Now in view 3, you can do multi-root templates. So it's kind of like a fragment, so you don't have to have a single root anymore. And we need to make sure we return the image source to be able to see it in the template. So let's go back to our template. I forgot to return image source. I don't see any linting errors. Let's see what we have in the browser. So right now, I also applied some styles. Maybe I glossed over that. Let's go back. You can see that I put this image in a div and I assigned it sort of a fixed height. And then I made the image type object fill. Maybe I actually need to add that to the image tag. We'll leave it here for now. We'll figure that out later. And then I made the image display block and I made it 100% of its parent. And that's necessary for the CropperJS library that we'll soon use. All right, back to the browser. So if I select an image here, let's get this guy. Very good. And you see there's some styling issues, but we see them displaying in the image. And if I clear, he's gone. And you could also look at this in the View Dev tools. Let's now get to adding croppers so that we see the image in this little box with a cropper tool. Now to do that, you need to import some of Cropper's styles. You could do that in main.js, but Vite comes with post-CSS and the ability to import other CSS modules built in. So we can actually go to our index.css, and then we can import from the node modules, Cropper's CSS. So it's in CropperJS dist, cropper.css. Maybe you can do the minified, but our build tool should also be able to minify all this later. Furthermore, we're going to add a couple of styles at the bottom of this pertaining to Cropper. And these styles are just going to make the crop area rounded. And you'll see this later. It'll basically have a highlighted section that you can kind of see what you're cropping. Our actual image is going to be a square crop. However, we're going to display it as a circular image. So just showing sort of a circular area will be helpful for the user who wants to crop their image. Now let's add logic to our image cropper to get this working. The first thing we need to do is add a ref to this image. And so that will give us access to this image tag inside of our template because we need this image tag to be able to work with Cropper, to instantiate Cropper. So we'll call a ref here. I'll put it in between these fields. We'll create a ref called image. And remember, we need to define this image in our template. So let's scroll down. Maybe I'll put it after image source. And then remember, we need to return this image from our template to link up the template and script. Or I should say, we need to return this image from our script. So let's call this image and hopefully save. And so that should work just fine. Let's now import Cropper so that we can instantiate it. So let's go import Cropper from, it's called CropperJS. And this is where I may need to restart my development environment or my Docker Compose, because I think once I import it, it's not going to be found. Yeah, we get some errors here. So I'm beginning to think this is a Vite issue. So I'm just going to Control-C and I'll run Docker Compose up and cut this part of the video. Now, also something that we're going to need to do is use Vue's lifecycle hooks to instantiate this cropper. So kind of what we're going to need to do is set up our initial configuration when it's mounted. And the reason we need to do it after it's mounted is because Cropper needs access to the ref of this image. Remember that image ref we just created, but the image ref is not available until the component is mounted. So if we were to just call in the template here, new cropper image.value from this image here, It's not going to work because this is going to be null until the component is mounted. And then we're going to want to dispose or destroy of this cropper when the component is unmounted, and we'll create some watching effects as well. So let's add these imports and we'll see what they do later. So on mounted, we're going to have on unmounted, and we're going to have watch. Now, beneath this file reader, let's instantiate our cropper. And actually, we're just going to use a let statement because we're going to want to initialize the cropper on mounted, as I just mentioned. All right, here's our cropper. Now let's add an on mounted hook. And let's add our hooks below the methods. Like here we have a watch effect. So let's maybe put it just above watch effect. And so then we're going to set the cropper to a new cropper. And now since we're in on mounted, we have access to that image tags ref. And we're going to set some basic settings here. The first is we want it to be square for our profile image. And I want it to have a width and a height of 256. This view mode just kind of has to do with how the image fills the canvas that's created. Drag mode allows us to move the image behind the sort of crosshairs of the cropper tool. This background makes a checkered background for any part of the image that is not filled, but I don't want that. And then I don't want to be able to actually move the crop area. I want to move the image only, and I want the cropper to kind of be fixed in the center of the square image. And you'll see how that works, but these are just some basic config values. We then need to add an on unmounted thing to destroy our cropper instance when our component is unmounted. I don't know if this would be handled automatically, but let's prevent any possible memory links. The next thing I want to do is watch for when this image source is changed. And that is because we want to update the image that our cropper sees if the source file in the image changes. And we need to make cropper aware of that because cropper on its own is not like reactive, nor is it built with Vue. So let's create a watch down here. So maybe after on unmounted and after watch effect, let's put it at the bottom before the return statement, of course. And then what we're going to watch is the image source. Now, image source is a ref, so we can just say to watch it directly. But if you wanted to watch like any other values change, you would put it inside of an arrow function and then return what you want to watch. But refs, we can just pass directly as the first argument. And the second argument is what to do if image sources change. So if it does have a value, we're just going to replace the value in cropper. So cropper has a method called replace that allows us to change the image that it's showing. This flush post runs after the component updates, meaning it's been mounted or updated. And that's just necessary to make sure we get access to the image source value on the initial page load, I think. Let's go ahead and save this. And let's demo the current state of our cropper. As you can see, it doesn't know that we have our CropperJS, and that was the whole import thing I mentioned. So I guess you don't just have to only import a file when you're using Vite in Docker. So I imported this and restarted Docker Compose. I think you actually have to use it, and until you use it, then Vue will not build it with its development environment. I'm going to make sure I rebuild the containers as well. Hopefully in a minute, we'll have our app running. All right, so after running Docker Compose down and then Docker Compose up with --build and --force recreate, it looks like it's rebuilt our dependencies. So hopefully we can go and reload the application. And here we go. We're at the update user page. Let's go ahead and select an image and hopefully see cropper. This one works good with the cropper. It's not zoomed in too tight. And you can see this was the circular style that we added. And remember I said we can't move this actual circle, but we can move the image behind it. And that was the sort of functionality that I wanted. So that was the point of our config. We can clear the image, but right now I didn't find a good method to clear the image without completely unmounting the cropper instance. So we're just going to handle that with some UI and completely hide this image box if there is no selected file. So let's go ahead and see this now. If we go back to our application's ImageCropper component in the UI, we can go to the top, and I'm just going to add to the div, the outer div containing the image, I'm going to add a only show this element, so I want it to be in the DOM, but not shown if image source is true. Or maybe I said that backwards, but anyway, let's save. And now, if we select an image, let's select her, it'll be shown here. Maybe sometimes you need to hard reload because of how I've set this up. Okay, there it is. We could select another image while this one is selected. Let's add me. I'm less good looking compared to the people in those profile images. Let's clear it, and you can see it's gone. And then let's select one more. Let's select this chap with a mustache. There we go. Excellent. So our cropper should be working. Now we just need to add some functionality to actually crop the image. The way I want to do this is to, when the image is selected, I want this button instead to say crop image. And when we click it, I want to actually crop the image. So here's what we're going to do in the template. We're going to add a vif to show this button if we don't have an image source. So we haven't selected any image, then show the select image button. Otherwise, we're going to add a button that says crop image with a velse statement. So there was some auto formatting there, but we're going to add a velse. So if there is an image, show this button that says cropped image. And when it's clicked, run the handle image cropped method. We need to create this in our script. And also, I want to end up emitting an event called ImageCropped so the user form can get the cropped image when the ImageCropper crops it. So to define events in the simplest way, we can just create an array with the names of the events. And I think this is sort of new to View 3, defining the events. It might have been added middle of View 2, but this event is going to be called ImageCropped. Then we'll create the method that was called when our button is clicked, called handleCropImage. Let's maybe do that after the file changed here. And we'll add this handleCropImage, not cropped image. And what it will do is it'll use Cropper's method called getCroppedCanvas. And so this will give us a sort of image with 256 by 256. I actually want to set this to low or leave it at its default. And then we're going to save it to a blob, which is a type of file. This will be uploadable to a file handler of an API, meaning like a multi-part form data API endpoint, which is what we have. I'll console.log this file now, just for our use, because we're about done today. And then we're going to emit that event we just defined called ImageCropped with the actual content of this blob. This second argument here defines the type of blob we want, which will be a JPEG image. You could also do a PNG, but I'm fine with the slightly lower quality. It's not noticeable at 256 pics, and JPEGs are smaller. But how do we get access to emit in View 3? You might remember in View 2, you would do something like this, $emit. And that's still available in the Options API of View 3, which really hasn't changed much. But to get it in a setup function, you can use your props as the first argument. And the second argument is a so-called context, which we can extract the emit function from. All right, so this handleCropImage gets called when we click this button, but we need to return it from our template, or return it from our script so it's visible in our template. There we go. And if I save, there's still one problem. Let's see. I think I called it handleImageCropped, and then here I called it handleCropImage. So let's fix it in the template. Actually, you know what? No, let's fix it in the script. I like handleImageCropped better. There we go. And then let's fix that here. There we go. All right. Now I have all the naming lined up, and let's see if we can crop this. Let's go to our console, and hopefully when we crop the image, we'll see a file here with its size, some basic details. Let's go with this one. Very nice beard. All right, let's then crop it. And you can see that we get the blob with a size of about 17 kilobytes of type image JPEG, so we'll be ready to upload this to our API. All right, that was a lot, but the good news is I finished in time to watch the Champions League at middle of day here on the Pacific Coast. So I hope you're as excited as me and that you also got the chance to watch the Champions League. This was a very UI-heavy tutorial. The next one's going to be that way too. We're going to end up adding form details to change the user's given name, I guess this is to change the image URL, but like their web address, maybe their email address in a form below. And then after that, we'll link that up with our API and application logic and hopefully be done with this part. Thanks so much for joining again, and I can't wait to see you next time. Hasta pronto. Ciao.